Jamie Lee Curtis is returning to Halloween. Is she returning to Halloween? She's not. I'm going to talk more about it in just a minute.
It's alive! It's alive!
What's up, everybody? It's bshowbrian. I'm going to be dropping this audio. Hopefully you're listening to this on the podcast feed, and if not, you can watch clips of this on YouTube at bshowbrian. Same thing, check out my socials at bshowbrian. There's one thing that really gets on my nerves, and it's clickbait. And I don't know why we fall for it. I don't know if it's because the content just gets in our skin, or if it's because as Halloween fans, and I'm a card-carrying member here, you can see my tattoo on my wrist, we just fall for the same old shit. But Jamie Lee Curtis was rumored recently to be coming back to the Halloween franchise. At least if you checked social media, that's what people were saying. And YouTube, people were using it to hook people in. I hate that shit. And I think part of it is because us, kind of as the Trekkies of horror movies, we like the same things. We like familiar. It piques our interest. Or on the other side, like me, you want nothing to do with Jamie Lee Curtis coming back to Halloween. I'll explain that in a minute. But basically, this all got started on an Entertainment Weekly interview that Jamie Lee Curtis did. And at the tail end of the interview, she had called in and she was being asked about a project she's working on now that's not related to Halloween. They asked her about the Halloween franchise, and probably through frustration, I don't know, because she comes off as kind of an asshole sometimes, she basically said, I've given away the bell bottoms, I've waved aloha to Laurie Strode, but if there's one thing I've learned, it's never say never. Says goodbye and hangs up the phone. Now, I don't know who ends a phone call like that, especially a professional one, but it kind of speaks to what I've always kind of thought about her and her character. Maybe she thought she was being playful, and I don't know the context of it, but it sounds kind of dickish. But that spurred this big reaction across social media where people were saying, is Jamie Lee Curtis coming back to Halloween? Is she going to be Laurie Strode again? No, it's not going to happen. She may come back for cameos like Nick Castle does, but I don't think there's any point in it at this point. So first off, she didn't say she was coming back. She did the never say never thing that if you're a wrestling fan, you've heard everybody say. But as a Halloween fan, can I just ask fellow fans, can we get past this? Can we get past this notion of Jamie Lee Curtis and the Halloween franchise? And look, I'll sing her praises all day long. She's a great actress. If it wasn't for her, then a lot of eyeballs wouldn't be on Halloween anymore. At some points, when the franchise is low, she elevates it. But can we also admit that Jamie Lee Curtis, when her prospects are low, also comes back to Halloween when it lifts her boat, when she needs the tide to lift her up a little bit? Can we admit that? Can we admit that Halloween is kind of Jamie Lee Curtis's Hollywood credit line? Can we? Please, just a little bit. I know she's Laurie, and I know she's great, and I know people love her, and I know H2O, people like that, and I know Halloween 2018 was good, and she had a good character and a good story. It was pretty well written in most cases. But can we please, I beg you, and if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see I'm begging you, can we please get past Jamie Lee Curtis? I'm sorry, okay? At some point, you have to move on. And it's a symptom of this franchise that they've not been able to move on. It's not necessarily the case. It's possible. Let's go back and talk about her history with the franchise. Jamie Lee Curtis starred in Halloween. She was a young, up-and-coming actress trying to find her break. Halloween is extremely successful, and it launches what she thought to be her career. And then getting a number of roles limited to horror movies and Final Girls. She wanted to break out and do something different. And John Carpenter, according to the lore, was surprised that Halloween hadn't catapulted her into stardom because of the success of the film. And so he said, come back, we'll do Halloween 2, I'll put you in this movie. And they again went back to the well. And it was successful, not as successful as the original, but it cemented her as that character. They killed off Michael, or so we thought. She goes on to Hollywood. She does Trading Places and A Fish Called Wanda and numerous other movies after that. The Halloween franchise limps along. And because of the story that was pigeonholed in Halloween 2 with the whole family relation storyline, they continue with the niece, and then Halloween 5 that spins out of control. And Halloween 6, it really spins out of control with that fan service on acid type of stuff. And again, I love the movie. It's hard to show off the tattoo the way it's positioned, but I love that movie even though it's fucking terrible. And you know, I don't know. I'm a glutton, I guess. It's just I'm a fan of the franchise. But after that whole mess, and after the rudderless, directionless franchise starts to peter out, in the middle of a straight-to-video release that was going to be Halloween 7, Jamie Lee Curtis either has the idea or is asked about the idea, depending on who you ask, by the way, to come back for an anniversary sequel. And because she came back, and because she was a star, and because she had cachet, a lot more eyeballs were on Halloween. A lot more money was allocated to the budget. There was a big media push. The stars aligned. It was a big success. Halloween Resurrection comes around, and she says, fuck this, I'm out. This is dumb, I'm out. And she goes away and goes to do other movies, and her career never really got to the same point that it had in the 80s and early 90s, but it still gave her a little bit of a boost. And then when Halloween needed a new direction, they chose Rob Zombie. And I will say this, I'm not the biggest fan of the Rob Zombie Halloweens. I liked it when it came out, but I recognized the flaws of it. Looking back on it, they're not my favorite movies in the franchise. I like movies like Halloween 4 more than Rob Zombie's Halloween, but they did something different. They gave it a fresh look. They gave it a fresh coat of paint. They gave it a different tone and tried some new things while still maintaining some of the source material of Michael Myers, Loomis, playing with it a little bit, Laurie Strode, but more or less remake. It was a traditional remake with a different flavor, a different lens, a different style, whether I like it or not. And it worked. It was hugely successful. Made a ton of money. Up to that point, it was the highest grossing Halloween of all time, whether I like it in terms of canon or not. Then Halloween 2 from Rob Zombie kind of, screwed the pooch, and then back into development hell they went. Until Halloween 2018, when Jamie Lee Curtis got called off the couch with the Activia yogurt cup, and they decided to reboot Halloween and the Laurie Strode story again. And they decided to do Halloween H2O20, essentially. And at that point, I don't know what else really could have been done. I think everyone was young enough, her and some of the other people that were in it, to pull it off. And it was a now or never type of situation. It also screams entirely lazy to me. It was an easy, thing to do. It wasn't a creative stretch. It was pretty, I don't want to say pedestrian, but it was. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I didn't like it as much as everybody else did. Everyone thought it was this amazing return to form, and it's fun. I like it in terms of the movies. It's one of the better ones. It's shot well. I think that it has some pacing issues. But as good as it was, it just didn't resonate with me as much as other people because, to me, it just felt like, okay, it's another rehash. And we're forcing a bunch of sausage into a casing that's too small, and we're moving through it too fast, and whatever. But it was good. It made a lot of money. It was well received critically and fan-wise, right, by audiences. And then they did Halloween Kills. And then Laurie, just like Halloween 2, spent most of the fucking movie on a morphine drip. And then Halloween Ends happens and shit fell apart. Whether you like the movie or not, it fell apart. And I dare say, I will say this, I'll go out on a limb. And as much as I don't like Halloween Ends, there's stuff to like about it. It looks good. It's shot well. The pacing's better than, I think, Halloween 2018 in some ways. I think had Laurie not survived Halloween 2018 or Halloween Kills and not just been kind of hanging around for this final confrontation around all this other stuff that's happening that really character-wise doesn't make sense for a lot of people in the movie, Michael included. I'll get to that in another video at some point. had Laurie not been in the situation, I think that Halloween Ends sequel would have made a hell of a lot more sense. But they want Laurie because of the cachet and the money and all that stuff. They didn't want to kill her off in Halloween 2018. So, along the line, they've tried to go different directions. Halloween 4 worked for what it was, although not as big a success, and then 5 and 6 fucked it up and they had to start over. Halloween H2O was a big success, then they fucked it with Halloween Resurrection, had to start over. Instead of relying on Jamie Lee Curtis again, they went with Rob Zombie, and it worked. And it proved that Halloween can exist and be successful and be well accepted, revered, regarded, whatever the case, without Jamie Lee Curtis being involved. And I hope we can get to that point. Because continuing to go back to the original and try to rekindle that flame, it's not going to work. You know, it worked 20 years later. It worked 40 years later because of nostalgia and anniversary and different circumstances, right? They worked for those reasons. But at some point, you're going back, and it shows with all of the sequels that come after them. Halloween H2O worked, Resurrection didn't, because you're trying to chase that success. And once you've told that story of H2O, that redemption, which I think was great. A lot of people don't like it. I think it's flawed, but it was good. Once you tell that story, now you go back and try to tell the next chapter. It doesn't work. You told Halloween 2018, and it worked. And then they did MAGA Halloween with kills, and it just went kind of off the rails. And at the same time, they're building Michael up to be this evil amongst, you know, this nature, this force of nature, this force of evil, and then he's living in a sewer and Halloween Ends. It didn't make sense. It's the same way regular sequels don't work with the original Halloween, because Halloween, as it was contained, is a completely different movie than any of the sequels that come after it. And it's impossible to go back and do Halloween. It's its own little contained bubble. And anything trying to replicate or continue that model and that formula is really heavy-handed, and it's obtuse, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work in many cases. But at least they tried something new with Rob Zombie's Halloween. And I think they can do it now again. Let it sit. Put it on the shelf. Let it gather some dust. And I don't want to see Jamie Lee Curtis anywhere near Halloween again. Singer praises. She's great, amazing, great actress, great talent. But she's also got a dual legacy in this franchise, right? A lot of people recognize her talents and her contributions, and rightfully so. But there's a lot of fans of the franchise that recognize that she's also kind of an asshole, or at least comes off like an asshole. And she doesn't like the horror franchise. I don't need my stars to like and be in love with the horror franchise. That's fine. But she's taken way too many shots at it after sucking life out of it. And that doesn't sit well with me. And also, let's not forget Scout Taylor Compton and Danielle Harris, stars of, the Danielle Harris, the Halloween films after Laurie Strode, played her daughter. Scout Taylor Compton played Laurie Strode in Rob Zombie's Halloween. At the Halloween Ends premiere, they told their side of the story, which Jamie Lee Curtis may disagree with and have a different take on. But according to Scout Taylor Compton and Danielle Harris, they tried to, at the Halloween Ends premiere, tap her on the shoulder and say, hey, you mean a lot to us. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't have careers. We want to tell you how amazing. They were fangirling or marking out. If you're a wrestling fan, it's marking out, right? They're fangirling for her and like gushing, like, hey, let's tell her this. It's the only time we're going to get to say this. And apparently, independently of one another, Jamie Lee Curtis pretty much did the Ruby Rock from Fifth Element. Basically, I don't know you. Go away. Not those words necessarily, not the go away part, but it was pretty much like I don't know you. And that is, I think, look, anyone in Hollywood that's successful, anyone in any industry who's that successful is probably an asshole. God knows, being a wrestling fan, not to bring it up too many times throughout the years, I've often said never tweet your heroes, because most of them are just kind of shitty, scummy asshole people. And I think that you can say that for a lot of people that are successful. Ego-driven, self-centered. You know, you can be this great activist and tell people how great you are because of like how you vote or what you stand for. But if two people come up to you to share how special you are to them and their careers and you kind of buzz them away, it's a shitbag move. And that feeling with the way she backhands the horror industry and community at times, to me, you've already had your redemption. You've had your second chances. You've had your opportunity to come back. Hulk Hogan, move the fuck out of the way and let somebody else step up. There's a lot of other talented people out there. And if they're going to go forward with a Laurie Strode Halloween Michael Myers reboot, a straightforward reboot, because I believe there's a television series in the works, find someone who's untested. Do the old slasher movie from the 80s formula. Find someone who's untested, who's inexperienced, but shows some promise, maybe some talent, and make that the next Laurie Strode. Or how about this? I'll get to this in a minute. Don't make it so Laurie Strode-centric. Michael stalks babysitters on Halloween, or young girls, or whatever. He's a great white shark that swims in, finds his prey, and goes after it. And guess what? Like Halloween Kills says, he creeps, he kills, he goes home. It's a simple formula and a simple philosophy, and it doesn't have to center around Laurie Strode, let alone Jamie Lee Curtis. Just my thoughts on that. And I want you to share your thoughts too. Email me, bshowbrian@gmail.com. You can leave comments below, whether you're listening on YouTube or whatever podcast host you listen on. Or you can find me on social media. Most of my handles are @bshowbrian. You can also find me Thursday nights live on Spitball Media on YouTube, talking about horror movies, more modern stuff, entertainment stories, big stories of the day with John and Shaheen. And let me know what you think. But hit that subscribe button and that notification bell. And I mentioned a minute ago, and thank you for that, by the way. Sometimes I want to just talk about this stuff. I don't want to do the stupid fucking vamping and like my shit and follow and subscribe. It's a necessary evil. And me just remembering to have to break it up and do that is painful for me. And unfortunately, the thanking you guys gets lost in that. So I appreciate anyone who takes the time to check this out, read, listen, read. Who's reading this? This is... Fuck. What you guys don't know is that I already did this an hour ago, and my recording software had an update and doubled all of my audio. So this is round 2. But I thank you again for following through my madness. And I mentioned a minute ago, Laurie Strode, not what is needed for Halloween. Let alone Jamie Lee Curtis. I don't think Laurie Strode needs to be a damsel in distress, a final girl. I think we've done that to death, right? Something that has not been focused on in quite a long time can be done to focus, the story going forward. The going after young girls or murdering people on Halloween, that could be like just Michael's MO. But something I thought of a couple years ago, I think I might have mentioned it on a video, either for Spitball Media on a Patreon podcast episode I did, or on this channel when talking about the future of the Halloween series. Something I kind of zeroed in on when talking about this stuff was, I don't think, as important as Laurie Strode and that character is, and Halloween's like my favorite movie of all time, I'm not going to front. And I'm not going to completely backhand Laurie Strode, the character, or Jamie Lee Curtis, the person. That was an important part of that story. It is iconic. It is as iconic as Marion Crane in Psycho. But at this point, I think what really made Halloween, aside from that, and we know Michael Myers is the franchise. You go back to any of those franchise horror movies that were super successful in the 80s. You look at Friday the 13th. You look at Nightmare on Elm Street. You look at Chucky. You look at Hellraiser until it fell off the rails. Any of those big franchise horror movies, it's a no-brainer at this point that the villain was the franchise. The villain was the star. So, okay, the villain's a star, needs a good foil. Michael Myers is Halloween. There's no question. Laurie Strode was a great component in that original story. But she wasn't the straw that stirred the drink. She wasn't the necessary component that really made that movie. She was a big part of it. She was co-star. She was the damsel. She was the one that fought back and defended herself, and was the one resourceful and paying attention. That I don't want to demean the character because it is important, but I think even more important that people overlook now because of his death being back in 1996 or 7, and because it's been 20, 30 years now since he's even been alive. Donald Pleasence's Sam Loomis. To me, and I've always felt this way, I've been going back to the old Halloween message board days, there's a reason why my avatar photo was Loomis. That character, his portrayal, his verbiage, the way he talked about Michael, the blackest eyes, everyone quotes that, right? Or, I saw him in a room, staring at a window, not looking at the window, staring past the window. At this night, death has come to your small town, Sheriff. You can either ignore it or help me to stop it. Those lines sold Michael Myers and the evil, because without Dr. Loomis, without him talking about the otherworldly presence of Michael, he's just a fucking guy in a suit with a mask and a knife stalking girls on Halloween. It's creepy, but it would be no different than Slumber Party Massacre or The Prowler or any of these other films that came after it. Carpenter knew and was smart enough to know that Michael Myers as a character was kind of a blank slate, and it was up to Loomis to sell the danger and the evil that was Michael Myers. Because without that, it's just a guy in a suit, and we don't really know. Like, go back to Black Christmas. It would be no different than Billy or whatever his name is in Black Christmas. I don't even know if he has a name in the original. But that was a guy who was crazy, who was stalking girls on Christmas at a sorority house. It would have been no different than that. Could you imagine if John Saxon in that movie somehow knew this guy and was looking for him, and he goes to town, and instead of being the sheriff, he goes in and he's like, Sheriff, you have to stop this man now. This isn't a man, he's evil. In John Saxon's way, right? I'm not John Saxon. But it would have been a completely different feeling. There was this sense of impending doom that Loomis was able to communicate. Donald Pleasence's performance really, really helped solidify that. And it wouldn't have been the same if not for that. On top of that, Loomis is the character that from the start was connected to Michael Myers. Halloween 2, to center it on Jamie Lee Curtis and to make her the star and to try to launch her career, even though she spent, as I mentioned, half the movie on an IV drip on a bedpan, waiting for Michael to show up so she can, defend herself. They had to force feed and shoehorn in the brother-sister story to make that work. When, in all actuality, the story that they had there, all along, from the beginning, from the first one, if you didn't complicate it by trying to continue Michael and Laurie's story, was Loomis and Michael. And that was hit on very well. That's one of the things Rob Zombie did in his Halloween is he focused on, even though Loomis was a shitbag and tried to capitalize and sell his books and didn't do right by the kid, there was still that connection from the beginning of the first movie all the way through the end of the second. There was a twisted fate with these two characters. And as I mentioned on Spitball Media a week or two ago, I didn't realize how close the characters and how important the characters of Loomis and Van Helsing in the original Dracula were to each other. Watching Dracula back, I've seen it numerous times, and watching it this Halloween season You see Van Helsing, he's a man of science. He's a doctor, he's a scientist, a psychiatrist. He's running the psychiatric hospital. Yet, when he sees Count Dracula, he's not only the first one to discover what he is, that something's off, but he's the one sounding the alarm. And you think this learned man of science would not believe in such childish things. This, I think they called it superstition and old tales from the old country. But with all these other professionals and smart or rich or, high society people going, oh, tut. Wolfbane? What's Wolfbane going to do? And you've got Van Helsing going, Wolfbane will protect you from Dracula. He is a vampire. He's the only one doing that. And he's warning everybody. That's the same thing with Loomis. And that's one thing I think with... The movie is fairly simplistic. I think we read more into it. I'm convinced more and more of that now, the older I get, is that a lot of things that I thought about the film and its meanings and its symbols, I think I read a lot into it. But Loomis was a man of science, was an experienced psychiatrist, was at the time respected. He gets this kid and realizes quickly this is not like a normal crazy person. This is not just insanity. This guy's evil. He's the devil. And I have to do everything I can to make sure he does not get out. When, in all actuality, everyone else around him and their clinical opinions are like, Doctor, we've read your notes, but blah, 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 blah. And they poo-poo it. And then guess what happens? He gets out. And then he goes to the cops. This is what he is. And in brackets, humoring him, but growing tired throughout the night when they're not seeing Michael. And Loomis is still saying, the blackest eyes, I saw him this, blah, 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 right? And it becomes tired in the later Halloween movies where even, like, I think it's Halloween 5, Sheriff Meeker throws him up against the wall and he's doing his, you never saw that nothing, that blank. And it's just, it's sad because he's old and it's tired at this point at Halloween 5. But Loomis, I think, is the most important character other than Michael. Laurie has her lineage and her history, and that's, an iconic role, the final girl and all that stuff. But I think you've done that to death, and horror has done that to death. Not just Halloween, but horror movies. He knows Michael better than anybody. And that's obvious. He was the first one to launch an offensive. So in the original Halloween, he's shooting at him. In Halloween 2, he, lures him into a operating auditorium or operating room, and he pulls the gas and lights the lighter and blows Michael up. Halloween 4, he's shooting at him. Halloween 5, he goes full on Stone Cold and opens up a can of whoop ass. He drops a chain net on Michael, shoots him with tranquilizer darts. He grabs a 2x4 like Hacksaw Jim Duggan and beats the fuck out of Michael until he goes unconscious. And according to the lore of the story, as it was written, he has a stroke and strokes out on top of him like, oh, hell yeah. Stone Cold Loomis over there. And it's, God, there's a lot more wrestling references in this video and podcast that I bargained for. So anyway, notwithstanding, Loomis was like taking it to him at 60, 70 years old, like trying to fight this guy. I think if you were able to plug in someone new, a good actor, maybe I'll do another, episode at some point where I try to pick like some modern actors that could do this, that are talented. I think Josh Hartnett would be great. I mean, he's old enough to look like a tenured doctor. He's a good enough actor to really pull it forward. He just isn't the type of guy to revisit roles or franchises and do sequels, which kind of sucks. But Loomis, as a character, knows Michael better than anybody. His fate is intertwined with Michael. He's really a tragic figure where here's this guy living his life, performing a service in some way, and he comes across this 7 or 8-year-old kid who happens to be evil on 2 legs, right? And now for the rest of his life, he's cursed with chasing this evil. Like Jack Sayers says in Halloween 4, you're hunting, ain't you, mister? Evil don't die like a man dies. You're fighting damnation. And great scene in that movie. I know a lot of people don't like that movie. But Jack Sayre's a great character, and it really solidifies Loomis and why he's important and the struggle that he has and the journey he's on. And it's a never-ending, thankless journey. You're going to be blamed. You're not going to be able to stop it, but you have to do something about it. And that's a great line, again, from Halloween 4. When he goes to leave the house and he's telling the sheriff, I got to go stop him. The sheriff's like, you know how to stop him? He's like, I don't know if anyone knows how to stop him, but I got to try. It's a throwaway comment in some ways, but it really solidifies Loomis's fate as, again, the Van Helsing to Michael's Dracula. I think that's the key, especially with true crime being popular. And I know it's a little bit dated at this point. It's getting long in the tooth. It's still really popular. I think, honestly, if they're going to go forward with a new reboot or a series or whatever the case, I say focus on Michael. Get Michael right, focus on Loomis, get Loomis right, have those two be the principals, against each other, with Michael doing his thing or escaping and Loomis hot on his tail and warning everybody, and build Loomis's character out a little bit more than what we see in the original Halloween over time. And then the babysitter stuff is incidental because that's just what Michael does. Jaws isn't about the people necessarily that the shark eats. It's intertwined in the story. It gives it gravity, gives it purpose, but it's about Chief Brody. It's about Brody and Quint, and it's really Brody, as Ahab. Technically, it'd be Quint as Ahab, but in a sense, the story is about Brody, and it's about this threat. And here he is as a law enforcement officer, but here's a threat from the water, from nature. Can't give it a ticket, can't pull it over for speeding, can't arrest it for murder. What do? He's got to protect it, but how does he do that? You got to go out, you got to hunt the son of a bitch. That's what Jaws is about. Just like Halloween, to me, as a fan, longtime fan, is more so about Loomis and Michael than about what Michael's motivations are or his MO and what he does. So I think if you look back on the series, Loomis is the only one who was ever smart enough, other than Laurie in Halloween H2O, Halloween 2018. And I guess in, the first Halloween film, she was resourceful, but it took Loomis to actually save her. Loomis is the only person other than Laurie in the history of the franchise that's been able to outsmart and defeat Michael. I think that's an easy go there. Instead of doing the Halloween 2018 route where they just cherry-picked details from the franchise past or unused ideas that were pitched and not seen on screen, which I think is kind of a travesty. Someone else pitches all these ideas and you kind of cherry pick. I don't know. I don't want to get too negative tonight. I already went pretty hard on Jamie Lee Curtis, but instead of the lazy pablum, like let's just reboot it and use the same story and just cherry pick things that have already happened. You got to build the story. You got to put the graft the mesh in there before the bone and the tissue can grow. So you got to use elements from the story, but at the same time, do something new. Expand upon something else. Go back and read the Halloween Sam, I think it's called Sam comic that they put out that showed what happened between like Halloween and Halloween H2O with Loomis and how Michael fucked with him. We'll talk about that on another episode. Do something different. The whole Laurie thing, it needs to die. It needs to die. Let's let it die. And guys, stop biting on fucking clickbait, please. And content creators, I know clickbait works, but it's fucking annoying. I've been reading stuff, interacting since the earlier days of, not early, but like mid-90s, late 90s internet. And I remember the days of the Halloween message board, and I'm not saying it was perfect there. There was people arguing and saying their piece and having spurgy arguments, but at the same time, like, I just hate this constant clickbait shit or on TikTok how everyone's just copying everybody else's content. Be better, man. Now I sound like Jamie Lee Curtis. Full Circle, sponsored by Dan and Activia. I'm bshowbrian. Thanks for checking this out. I want to do more of these, and hopefully you guys want me to too. But like, comment, follow, subscribe, ding the bell like fucking Quasimodo, and let me know what you guys think. bshowbrian@gmail.com. All my social medias at bshowbrian, and find me on Thursday nights live with Spitball Media, talking about the biggest stories in entertainment and horror. And you can catch our replays on YouTube and our podcasts everywhere podcasts are found. But I'm out of here. Have a good night, and I'll talk to you soon.